What is going on, football fans? Back at it with another New York Giants video. I'll probably go live with you guys tomorrow. I was busy today. We'll talk about this. We'll talk about all the moves that the New York Giants have made. I'll definitely do that tomorrow, being that the New York Giants are starting to make some impact moves. When the offseason started, I thought it was going to be a pretty slow free agency period, which it has been for the most part. I mean, at the end of the day, the New York Giants' two biggest signings have been a guard and a backup quarterback, but I did think that the Giants would address these two positions specifically in free agency. I thought they'd get a backup quarterback, something that they've needed, and obviously they needed some help on the interior part of that offensive line, along with the right tackle spot, which I think in the end they will address in the first round of this year's draft. But I think we all agree that going into the offseason, we needed a dramatic upgrade at the backup quarterback spot. Daniel Jones, after all, has injury concerns, and we don't know how he's going to respond to this injury. Do I think he'll be ready to go day one? Yeah, I do. I'm not too worried about it, but he's been a guy that's missed time each of his first 3 years in the league, and last year we got a dose of just how bad the New York Giants looked when they had a guy like Mike Glennon, who quite frankly could not get the job done. The same could be said for Jake Fromm. By getting a guy like Tyrod Taylor, and we're going to talk more about him throughout the video, I think it accomplishes several different things. One, it provides very good insurance in case Daniel Jones does go down with an injury. You know you could bring in a guy that's an established veteran quarterback from within the NFL. He's been to the playoffs with the Buffalo Bills. He's got a career record of 26-25. He's won games with some mediocre football teams, and he's not going to be a guy that's going to go out there and lose you football games. So I think at a bare minimum, he provides good depth at the quarterback position, something we learned last year as Giants fans, specifically with Daniel Jones on the roster as opposed to Eli, which we took for granted because Eli never got hurt. We could use some more talent at that backup quarterback spot. The other thing that I think it does is it does provide some pressure to Daniel Jones, and we'll see how Daniel Jones responds to that. This is the first year where it is clearly obvious that the New York Giants will not be rolling out the red carpet for number 8. I do think Daniel Jones will be the starter day one. I still do not think the New York Giants will be drafting a quarterback, but he certainly will have some pressure. He'll probably have 4 or 5 games to get situated into the new scheme, and we'll see how he does. But Tyrod Taylor is not a guy, if you are playing very poorly, that is just going to sit on the bench. And hopefully that makes it so Daniel Jones gets the most out of his ability and thrives in this new offense for the New York Giants. Yes, I recognize that the quarterback market was very high, but when you look at the cap space that the New York Giants had to spend, for them to decide to spend as much on a backup quarterback as basically, any other position on this roster this offseason, it came at least close to what they spent on their guard, tells you that they felt like they really needed to address this position, whether it be due to Daniel Jones' injury potential or the fact that they feel like they don't know one way or the other whether or not Daniel Jones is going to be the guy throughout the season. The other thing I'll say about Tyrod Taylor, if at the end of the year the New York Giants decide in 2023 they want to draft a quarterback, I do think in that scenario, which I'm hoping is not the case, I hope Daniel Jones becomes the next great quarterback, but if they have to take a quarterback, I think Tyrod Taylor is an ideal, a guy that could mold a young quarterback, similar to what he did with Justin Herbert there with the Chargers, a guy that could play maybe 3 or 4 weeks, and then you bring in your rookie. So I think the Giants are probably looking at it that way as well. Now, when I first saw the contract, my eyes popped out of my head because I first read $17.5 million, just like a lot of other people on Twitter. And as fans, you get excited when your team makes moves. You have instant reactions. A lot of this contract is incentive-based, but regardless, he's still set to make nearly $6 million a year, at least according to Ian Rappaport, before the incentives. In terms of what the incentives are, well, that remains to be seen. I would assume it would be playing time and things of that nature. Whether or not he becomes the starter, Jones goes down with an injury, I would assume it would be, the amount of games played, but I'm sure we'll get further detail on that, hopefully when the contract comes out. This coming out from Rappaport. It's a 2-year deal worth $11 million, source said, 5.5 per year. There are incentives he'd have to hit to bring it to $17 million. So I'd assume the cap hit, at least on average, will be $5.5 million a year. They'll probably break it down, similar to the way they did the first contract, where they pay him a little bit less this year. The cap's going up next year. They have more cap space. But regardless, he's set to make $5.5 million a year over the next 2 years, and will be the backup, at least as of now, for the New York Giants going into the 2022 season, rather. In terms of what Tyrod Taylor has provided in the NFL since he's been in the league, He's 32 years old. I do think he at least has a similar skill set to that of Daniel Jones. He's mobile. So I think the Giants probably looked at it that way as well, and they probably felt like he's the type of quarterback that could fit what they're looking to do. And when you look at the quarterback market, you had Marcus Mariota. That was another very popular name. You had a guy like Andy Dalton. But Tyrod Taylor is certainly a very good backup. This is what he did throughout his career. He played with the Ravens, the Buffalo Bills up until 2017. Joe Shane came there in 2018, the year after they made the playoffs. But with the Buffalo Bills, like I said, he did make the playoffs. I think it might have been 2016 in which he did, but he had a couple of pretty good years when you look at his numbers. 20 touchdowns, 6 picks, 17 touchdowns, 6 picks, 14 touchdowns, 4 picks. He was basically a game manager. Over 3 years, the guy only threw, 16 interceptions? He didn't lose the football game for his team, and that's the type of quarterback that I would expect the New York Giants to be getting with a guy like Tyrod Taylor. Basically a poor man's Alex Smith. That is always the way that I viewed Taylor. Alex Smith had mobility as well. He was a game manager. Smith, of course, had more success throughout his career, made several Pro Bowls, and had great success with the Kansas City Chiefs and the San Francisco 49ers. Of course, he was put in ideal circumstances, but I view him as that type of quarterback. Obviously a little bit more mobile. But regardless, I think it's added competition for Daniel Jones. I know some Giants fans are going to be upset about this because there's a lot of people that love Daniel Jones. And listen, Daniel Jones is my quarterback. Daniel Jones is my guy. I love Daniel Jones. I want Daniel Jones to be the second coming of Eli Manning. But I do think it's in the best interest of this football team. And I hope, for Daniel Jones' sake, something great comes out of this for him. You get a better mind as your backup quarterback, a guy that is very familiar from playing within the league. And like I said, added pressure. Maybe that forces Daniel Jones to take the next leg up. We'll have to wait and see. Jones is going to have his own challenges coming back from the injury, having to deal with a new scheme, and hopefully Brian Daboll's able to get the most out of him at the quarterback position. But as Giants fans, we have to remember this new regime. Brian Daboll and Joe Shane have no ties to Daniel Jones. I do think Jones will be the starter day one. I see some Giants fans on Twitter saying that maybe they're going to look to trade Daniel Jones right now after this and draft a quarterback. For me, if anything, this further cements my opinion that I do not think we will be drafting a quarterback in the first round of this year's draft. The fact that the New York Giants spent nearly $6 million a year on a backup quarterback. Tyrod Taylor will be your backup. I don't see much of a trade market for Daniel Jones. Is it possible you could trade him for something? Sure, but you're talking about a guy that has not had too much success. He's coming off an injury. I think Jones will be the starter. I don't see us drafting a quarterback at least early in this year's draft, and Tyrod Taylor will be the backup. If Jones does not take the next big step up this season in 2023, I think we're going hunting for a quarterback. I think we're going to, look long and hard at that quarterback class. And I think Taylor, like I said at the top of this video, would be an ideal fit for a guy that could mentor that young quarterback and show him the ropes. And I think that's probably the way that Joe Shane looked at this signing. Good insurance for Jones, a capable starter if Jones goes down or really struggles midway through the season, and at a bare minimum, if Jones does not work out, a good mentor for the future quarterback that you bring in. But I like this move as a Giants fan. I think we needed a dramatic upgrade at the backup quarterback position. I think we all were sick and tired of seeing Mike Glennon last year along with Jake Fromm. So we definitely got a better backup quarterback. And I think Shane said at the start of the offseason that they were going to prioritize the backup quarterback, and they certainly did that. Like I said yesterday, I still expect the New York Giants to try to attack the tight end in some way, shape, or form in free agency, and they'll certainly do that in the draft. And after that, quite frankly, I don't know how much money we're going to have to spend. Obviously, we're still looking out for a potential James Bradbury trade to clear up more cap space. But for now, the Giants got themselves a pretty solid backup quarterback in Tyrod Taylor. As always, guys, if you liked what you watched, please subscribe, drop a comment, maybe give me a little thumbs up. Cheers.